I don't like to take a one-size-fits-all approach to organizing my life because realistically, one tool can't do everything for me. That being said, I don't want to overwhelm myself with too many tools, so which ones do I use to help me get things done and stay productive? Before we look at what I'm using, it's important to consider why I'm using it, or what information am I trying to capture, organize, and use. Everybody is different, everybody's situation is going to be slightly unique, and the information that you need to capture and organize in your productivity system might be different to mine. So just because these are my tools does not necessarily mean that they're going to be right for you, but I wanted to show you what they were. In my productivity system, I'm primarily looking to organize, first of all, tasks, so my to-do lists, the things I need to get done. As part of this, we also have routines and habits that I'm trying to build. Oftentimes those are tasks or sequences of tasks in their own right, but they're slightly different because I want to do them repeatedly. We have events and appointments or things that are kind of like scheduled with a particular date and time. My goals and projects, so those kind of longer series of tasks that are usually more like one-offs, but they have some kind of importance or specialty to me, which means that they're slightly aside from regular everyday tasks. These are usually outside of the daily grind and more so things that I'm kind of aspiring to reach. To keep myself productive, I also have to be able to organize correspondence and communications, making sure that people can reach me, I can reach them, and any information in that is going to be captured well. And then we also just have other key information and notes. That category in particular is pretty big and pretty wide-reaching. It's essentially in every area of my life. So it could be work-related notes, home, personal, finances, whatever else. I need my productivity system to be able to organize those in such a way that I can use them moving forward. I can not only find that information again, but it can also be transformed into whatever output I need for it. The first tool I have though is what I call my everyday journal. This is effectively like a DIY planner. I start with a doc-grid notebook and draw in layouts and structures that are going to help me get things done. The primary type of information that I'm capturing in here though is tasks, whether they be on a daily task list kind of basis or a weekly task list. I typically find it harder to think further than the scope of that when it comes to everyday going-ons. So when it comes to organizing information in whichever everyday journal I'm using at the time, it's mainly made up of daily task lists and a weekly dashboard structure. That dashboard in particular is where routines and habits are stored. I like to put a tracker in there, and I keep it on a weekly basis rather than a longer scale of time because I will just not go back and check in with it if it is monthly or annual. Annual is always most at risk of me just like ignoring it. If I keep it weekly though, then it's there with those weekly priorities and task lists that I will check in with on a more regular basis. It helps keep those things top of mind so they're more likely to get done. My everyday journal though is also where I keep things like mind unwinds or brain dumps. This is essentially just a time where you try and get everything out of your head into some other system, whether that be on paper like me or maybe a digital system, just so that you can organize and sort through it. You kind of stop that rumination that might be going on in your head, get it onto paper so you can look at it more objectively and then take action. Some of the things that come out of a mind unwind will end up being tasks that I want to take action on, or they might end up being notes that I want to store elsewhere. I did used to call this one my bullet journal, but I don't really think it's a bullet journal anymore. I've kind of taken the aspects of the bullet journal method that worked well for me and resonated with me, but then also introduced other things that aren't part of that system. So I honestly think calling it like my DIY planner or DIY journal is a better name for it. If you have any name suggestions for my everyday journal though, you let me know. The next tool I have though is my goal planner. And funnily enough, this one is for planning my goals. Rather than keeping those goal plans in my regular everyday journal, where I do like to be a little bit more decorative, because if it's decorated, I will like it more and I'm more likely to actually use it. When it came to my goal planner, I wanted this to be really low-key, really simple and easy to use, and also something that I didn't mind being a little bit messy in. While I get a little bit prissy, I'm a bit of a persnickety biscuit when it comes to the way my everyday journal looks, my goal planner has been intentionally set up with mess in mind. I do still try to keep things neat in there. I want to be able to read the things that I've written after the fact, but this is very much where the messy planning stages of goal setting happens. While I could definitely have gone with a pre-printed goal planner, I actually have my own goal setting system that I like to use, and I also recognize that not every goal is going to need the exact same structure when it comes to the planning stage, so I'd much rather make those goal plans myself. They do all have the same kind of base structure or base elements, but not every element is necessary for every single type of goal, so I don't want to have a pre-printed planner for this that has all of those sections, and then I only use like half of them for some of the goals I'm setting. Effectively, I just like the flexibility of drawing it up myself. This one isn't just for goals, it's also for projects, but we have spaces in there for goal brainstorming, actually selecting the goals that I'm going to be working on, planning out those goals so that I know how I'm going to tackle them, and reflecting on my progress. I do also do reflection in my everyday journal, but that's more so mid-cycle or mid-month reflection and end-of-month or end-of-cycle reflection. I do cyclic planning rather than monthly planning just because a cycle, which is 4 weeks for me, is just a nicer unit of time to think about, at least in my mind. We have a separate video on the channel about cyclic planning, but let's get back to the tools. When it comes to the reflection I'm doing in my goal planner, this is quarterly reflection. So closing out one quarter and thinking about the goals I want to work on for the quarter ahead. I like to set my goals on a 90-day or 3-month kind of system, just because that is enough time for me to actually make genuine progress on something, but not so long that I kind of get bored and lose interest and just fall off working on the goals. I find that half-year or annual goals are just too big for me. I find it very hard to look that far ahead and think about what life might be like. And I also find that planning that far in advance usually isn't great either, because stuff happens that I wasn't necessarily expecting at the start of my planning stages. 3 months is a little bit safer for me. I do think in future I might combine these two together and just have like one notebook to rule them all, but I'm still thinking that over. No promises. I do have other notebooks that I like to use, like my 5-year journal, but that one isn't so much part of my productivity system, it's a just for fun memory keeping type notebook. While my 2 notebooks are primarily for tasks, goals, routines, and habits, as soon as something has a specific date and time tied to it, that's when it's going to be put on my calendar. I personally prefer to use a digital calendar for any time-based appointments, mainly because 1, if the time changes, whether that be like the time it starts, or the time it ends, or the date entirely, it is much easier to just go and move that on a digital calendar compared to erasing it and rewriting it, and then maybe if you wrote it in pen, you have to kind of like scratch it out and make your journal look messy. I told you, I'm a little bit prissy about those kind of things. I want my journal to look nice, and scribbling things out and having to rewrite them somewhere else is not the aesthetic I'm aiming for. But in addition to this, I also just find it easier to visualize my week if I've got it on a digital calendar. Having a time and place just written in a list kind of form in my journal isn't necessarily the best way for me to visualize how long things are going to take and how the parts of my day are going to fit together. And I am also the kind of person who really likes to schedule their day out in full, so putting in things like, when is my morning routine going to be? When are we going to be having dinner? When's lunch? What kind of work blocks do I have on there? On my digital calendar, I also like to do time blocking, so setting aside particular blocks of time to do particular things. And I like to color code this by life area so I can see at a glance where I'm spending my time, and making sure I don't work too much, because I very much fall victim to that often. You can see we have a decent amount of blue on this calendar because blue is the color I use for work. I'd be curious to know what color you use for work. I just kind of associate work with blue. Something that is tied to the calendar though is my email system. I use Outlook for both just because it's something I'm more familiar with. And as can be expected, this is primarily for correspondence and communication. There are definitely other communication systems I use, but when it comes to kind of productivity related stuff, email is usually the one I'm using. The nice part about using the same app for email and my calendar though, is that if I get an email in about a time-based event, I can then drag that email into my calendar and have all of the details tied to that scheduled block. This means that if I need some kind of like confirmation code or any kind of information about where the event is or what I might need to do in advance, it's all right there on my calendar. And I didn't have to go and rewrite it, which is also quite nice. To keep me organized and productive, I have a 3 inbox system. So I have a personal inbox, which is for, personal newsletters and stuff, mainly recipes. I have a work inbox, which is mainly for everything JashiiCorrin related. And then I have a home inbox, which is shared with my partner for anything that is going to be related to both of us. So whether that be events and appointments that both of us need to be aware of, or accounts that we both share, like Netflix, all of those kind of things go into there. When it comes to organization in my inbox, I mainly use a folder system, making use of both temporary and permanent folders. In terms of the temporary ones, these are for projects that are only going to be for a short span of time. Maybe they have an upcoming date where they're going to become obsolete or I'm not going to need those emails anymore. So we have folders for things like our wedding, for the plumbing issues we're trying to solve. We'll make one for any upcoming trips or travel that we're having. But as said, we do also have some permanent folders. I like to keep one in particular for appointments, so those kind of confirmation emails you get about having scheduled something. I have a folder called To Budget, mainly so then when I go and look over the log of charges on my cards or whatever, I know exactly what each of those are, especially when businesses use like weird names in their charges and you're like, who the heck is that? At least I have the invoices and receipts in that To Budget folder that I can reflect on. I also like to keep a separate folder for vouchers, and sometimes if I know I'm at risk of not using the voucher, I will drag that into my calendar and put the expiry date on there, just so that I can actually see it upcoming and make sure I use that voucher if I want to. Another folder that is important to have for me is orders I'm waiting on, mainly because I will very often forget that I have packages that are coming. I want to make sure that there's going to be somebody around to collect them. I want to make sure that I pay attention to whether they actually arrive, and then if they don't arrive, I can chase them up. The final category of information that I'm trying to organize as part of my productivity system though is the biggest one, and that is notes and other key information. The space in particular that I like to use for this is Notion, mainly because you can really customize it, really make it your own, and it's a digital space, so it comes with all of those benefits of having like cloud backup, being shareable with other people, being easily editable, accessible from multiple devices, all of that kind of thing. Currently, I'm kind of aiming to make my Notion space a kind of one-stop shop for all of the life information I have. I'm slowly getting there, but I'm not quite there yet. I kind of treat my Notion space like a second brain. So instead of trying to just remember all of the information that I'm taking in, whether it's like a book I've read or a video I watched or something like that, I like to store that information in Notion. This is also the main space that I use to plan out all of my video content. So not only do I have my overall video schedule or work output schedule, because it's more than just videos, it also captures posts and book club things and membership perks and whatever else. Being able to have that captured in not only a calendar space, but also in a list view or a Kanban board. I just really love the flexibility of being able to visualize the exact same information in different ways without having to rewrite it all. I don't just like to use Notion for work-related things though, I also use it for personal and home-related stuff. So for instance, my partner and I have spots about wedding planning in there. We're also building a home recipe book in there, just so that we can see all of our recipes nice and easily sorted by different protein types, meal types, our favorites versus ones we just kind of want to try or their ideas at this stage. And the best part is that not only can I see that information on my computer or on my tablet, but I can also access it on my phone when I go to cook things in the kitchen. Of course, there are other things that I like to use for my organization, whether it's alarms on my phone or Shishmexa to keep me to time. I'm also a really big lover of Excel, and we do all of our budgeting and finance stuff in there. But for productivity in particular, my planners, Outlook, and Notion are the big ones. I really love Notion in particular because despite it being a digital tool, it is also just really flexible and you can build effectively whatever you want in there. Plus they have a bunch of templates that you can kind of start with, so you're not starting from a blank page every time. And we do have a separate video on the channel that has more about how you can use it for yourself. In that one we go over not only Notion basics, but also a little bit more of an in-depth look at my system. So click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.